Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. Okay, here's the dilemma. You've got a workforce of smart people. They're engaged, they're passionate, and you don't want them to phone it in when it comes to providing quality input about important strategic decisions, right? You want them all there. You want the best of what their genius brains have to offer. But here's the thing. We live in a quickly changing world, and we need to be agile, responsive, nimble, right? We often need to make decisions and move forward faster than we'd like. So how do you balance these two opposing forces? The need to move quickly and the need to be thoughtful and engage as many people as necessary in decisions that will impact them. I'm sure you've been there. I mean, we've all probably faced this challenge, but probably not at the scale that today's guest was facing. Today, you'll hear my interview with Stefka Anderson. Stefka is the HR director for Global R&D and Global Support Functions at Driscoll's, a brand you probably know because, as she will share, it's the number 2 brand in America. Imagine that. And plus, they have delicious berries. Stefka works really closely with the leadership teams in Global R&D, Global Research and Development, and Global Support Functions to set the people strategy aligned with the strategic plans for the company. Said differently, she makes sure that people are supported with the skills and abilities they need to meet the demands of the business. And that means that she's constantly forward-looking, and she has a front row seat to the challenge of how to swiftly engage hundreds of people from a wide variety of disciplines and time zones in meaningful ways, and to make change move faster. So as you listen to this episode, think about some of the challenges you face with leading people through decision-making and change. You know, like when you ask people to contribute to a decision that's being made, but they don't get around to it. So you make the decision, and then folks want to chime in afterwards and change things after the fact. And oh my gosh, that feels like resistance at the moment, right? Or when you face the inevitable emotions that people have about change and you hear yourself saying, hey, this isn't personal, it's a business decision. But then you realize that it's very personal for them. Or when you engage people with a lot of thought and care, but then new information gets introduced and you have to change course and everyone feels betrayed. Or when you forget to engage the right people at the right time, and you don't really notice until you hear the complaints from every direction that, we were never told. Change is hard, my friends, no doubt about it. And Stefka's challenge was to create a learning program that helped people engage constructively and swiftly in the decisions that lead to change, and then turn around and activate energy around change, leading their teams using a shared process that really works. Because remember, with all the different disciplines and aspects of global research and development, Stefka and her leadership team knew that people's orientation to decision-making and change needed to be more consistent and predictable, because that was the way to reduce friction and churn while ensuring quality decisions and action in a very timely manner. So I had the honor of working with Stefka and her amazing team side by side to develop and deliver this program that we called Change Agility, which was designed to create greater alignment across the entire function and to help people stay fully engaged while moving quickly. We leverage the working genius and the widget model because it's based on how work gets done. You've heard me talk about this on the podcast before, and my goodness, it was a powerful and effective framework. I loved being a part of it. So without further delay, here's my conversation with Stefka Anderson. Okay, welcome, Stefka. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Claire. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yes, my pleasure. I was really excited to talk to you because I have had the wonderful pleasure of seeing you in action as a very strategic HR business partner. And we've been working together long enough. So I have seen you kind of grow through the ranks at Driscoll's and I love Driscoll's. Driscoll's is a great brand. It always feels like such a hometown brand to me because, headquarters are here near where I grew up. But I know that Driscoll's is a really big name. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, I know it does. It feels very hometown to me too. I grew up from a Driscoll's strawberry field, but didn't ever think back then that eating those juicy strawberries from across the street that I'd be working for the company later. And yeah, it's kind of exciting. We're now the second highest selling brand in the US, which is pretty cool.
That is totally amazing. It feels amazing, but then everywhere you go, there's Driscoll's berries. So always delicious and predictable, which I love.
Delighting consumers.
Yes, delighting consumers day in and day out. So tell me a little bit about what it means to be a strategic HR business partner. I feel like that's sort of a unique spin on just being an HR business partner, of course, and what it means to help shape business strategy as you do, like in a global organization like Driscoll's.
Okay. Yeah. So I've been in this role for about 3 years now. And when I joined, the role was actively evolving. And we were sort of at a point then in our organizational and HR maturity where we were setting new standards and expectations for how HR worked in the business and what we were holding ourselves accountable for delivering. So, how I think about being a strategic HR business partner is it really means anchoring the HR strategy within the business strategy. They can't be separate things.
Right.
And so you have to almost work backwards from what the organization's long term strategy is to then what the business unit or functional strategy that the HRBP is sitting in and serving on, whichever leadership team that is, and then building a people plan that ultimately helps the organization achieve its longer term objectives. So if I could draw it in a diagram, it would look like three concentric circles, like the organization's strategic plan as the largest circle. And then within that circle, the business unit or functions strategy. And then within that circle, the HR or people strategy is what we are calling it now to ensure and enable that the business unit or function achieves those longer term objectives.
That is fabulous. I just love the alignment of that model because it feels a lot like in so many organizations I'm in that these things are treated somewhat separately.
Yeah, and it's hard. I think we've come a long way in HR and at Driscoll's with integrating HR more closely with the business. It didn't always used to be that way. And I would say that as the organization has evolved, as we've grown, as we've expanded, also the HR maturity in the organization has evolved with it. And I think the partnership has become stronger.
Yeah, that's great. And so you're within global research and development, yes?
Yes, Global R&D.
Okay. And we did a change agility program together that I really want to focus on a little bit today. But first, I want to ask you why, you know, you've explained this to me, and I want our listeners to hear it a little bit. Like, why is research and development on the cutting edge of change? Why is research and development out there in front when it comes to forging their way through change?
I'll answer that question, but just to even give the listeners a bit more context, Global R&D at Driscoll's does, because R&D can be fairly broad depending on whatever the industry is. And so at its core, Global R&D at Driscoll's is responsible for the breeding of our proprietary berry varieties, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. There's a lot that goes into that I won't get into today. But just to give even a bit more context for the listeners within Global R&D, there are highly scientific sub-functions There's also a farming function, there's a plant health and management function, and there's also a function that focuses on the deployment of our R&D solutions to our growers. So we've got quite a blend of employees in different disciplines and across geographies. So when you think about that last part, which is the connection point to our growers, providing our growers with solutions on plant management, on pest management, on how to grow certain varieties in different conditions, especially when then we're facing the external factors like that we are, like climate change, the continuous introduction of technology, machine harvest, better, more efficient ways to irrigate. Those are all the things that we're looking at to try to be sure that as a company, we are living up to our vision of enriching the lives of everyone we touch. And that includes providing solutions that are going to help our growers continue to be profitable and sustainable in their growing practices. And, just being a good steward of the environment with how we utilize water, natural resources, etc., and how we remain competitive with the introduction of things like AI and robotics, and ensuring that we bring all of those solutions to our growers, our grower community, because without them, we would not be able to be who we are today.
It's so amazing. I mean, there's so many things going on. And so I'd imagine that everywhere you look, like you said, there's technology, there's natural resources, there's new markets, there's competition, there's so many things. And you have to always be strategically looking far forward because it takes time to implement whatever it is that you're thinking about. I mean, just even in terms of like, I thought about this recently, how long it takes to just grow the plants and get from, hey, we'd like to test this new variety in a new region, all the way to, okay, now we're ready to go to market.
It's a very long process, yes. And then when you get to the go point, like, hey, yeah, we're ready to go, there's still influencing and buy-in that has to occur, even at that stage.
Right. Okay. So even with long on ramps like that, there's so much that I know Driscoll's needs to pay attention to in terms of change agility, the ability to transform quickly. Even though we were just talking about those long on ramps, there's a lot of other aspects and things that people just need to be able to adapt quickly. So I know you've recently completed a program called Change Agility specifically, and it was a very unique approach to change leadership. So set the stage for us here. Tell me, what were you seeing in the way people were working that led you to believe it was time to intervene and support greater change agility?
Yeah, it was really based on where Driscoll's was at the time. I mean, this is 18 months ago about, and where we want to go. One very obvious capability we identified within Global R&D that needed some development was this idea of change agility that you just mentioned. We recognized that we had had great success as an organization thus far, and of course, want to carry forward all those key ingredients that have made us very successful that we believe are part of the recipe for future success.
Right.
And we also acknowledge the ever changing external world, some of that of which I just alluded to. And it can be very, VUCA in some senses.
We should explain what VUCA is just for folks. What is the volatile, uncertain, something like that? What's the
Yes,
C?
complex and ambiguous.
Yes,
Yeah,
complex and ambiguous.
VUCA, VUCA. It's an acronym. It's a real simple way to describe where we're in. And so linking back to what I was talking about around the future business strategy and how that dictates where we want to go, and acknowledging both the internal and external environmental challenges. And I'm using environmental, figuratively here. So it's all encompassing, yes, the environment and all the other things. It just became so clear that introducing a framework and a common language to drive and talk about change was going to be so important for our longer term success.
Right.
It wasn't like we weren't doing some of that already in pockets and some folks that were doing that really well, but we wanted to cast a wide net to bring a group of people along. And so at a micro level, right, when we talk about change, we're all just human beings, individuals with different thresholds and receptivity to change, how we view it. And then at a more macro level, we recognize each functional area. So the farming, the breeding, the plant health, the deployment, I'm just talking within R&D, also has their own experiences with change and how often they have to drive change in the workplace based on the work that that function performs. So in order for us to bring a big group of people along, it was important that we create a common framework and introduce a language that also builds on the Driscoll's values, some of those key ingredients that have made us successful so far and that are so deeply ingrained into the fabric of our company culture. And so we called Claire and we talked about what can help us be better at change agility. And it was important to pick something that was simple, that was easy to remember, and that could be easily applied. That was one important thing. So often trainings, they become, a binder or a book on the shelf. And our goal was to find something that we could easily integrate, again, along with building on and being complementary to our Driscoll's values and as well as our insurgent attitude behaviors. So things that are critical to shaping our culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about Driscoll's values for a moment. Share with us Driscoll's values so everyone knows what we're talking about.
We have 3 Driscoll's values. They are passion, humility, and trustworthiness. The passion to excel and accomplish great things, the humility to respect and learn from our colleagues and our competitors, and the trustworthiness that transforms our dependence upon one another into our greatest strengths.
Okay, so let's talk about those 3 values a little bit more because I love the juxtaposition of those 3 values. One of the things that I think is so important when it comes to change agility is if we over focus on the agility word, let's do it fast. Let's be agile. Let's let go of the past quickly and move on, this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, that could compromise some of the incredible depth of knowledge that is available within your workforce. You've got incredibly brilliant people working at Driscoll's. It could potentially compromise passion a little bit. People are very passionate about what they do. We don't want to compromise that at all. We just want to keep it in balance, right? With humility and with trustworthiness and bring those values into play along with a structure, a framework for how to move through change a little bit more quickly, let's say, or at a steady, predictable pace, because some people do naturally just go faster than others. And so we have a nice predictable process to lean into. So we go, there are certain stages of change, there are certain stages of decision making and moving work forward. And if we all know what those stages are and we can move together through those stages, we have that common framework. It sort of lifts the veil on what is happening with this change and what is happening with this decision. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think the predictable process inserts some objectivity to it as well, which can help bring people together because, again, we're humans. We have our own different thresholds and receptivity to change, and it can change depending on what the change is. You can be the same person and love one change and hate another. And again, the functions, interaction and experience with change varies. So you have maybe like the deployment function as an example is used to being out there and like driving the change with the front line. And there's other functions that aren't necessarily at the forefront or having to drive it as much. And so there's obviously different opinions and feelings about it. So the predictable process, I think, helped to balance out those passions that were coming from different places and allowed people to trust the process and then lean into the humility a bit, the humility to learn, come together as a cohort, to learn a new language, to learn a new way.
Yeah, I love that.
to learn a way that works that everyone can anchor to.
Right. So I think we should talk a little bit about the framework. Is that all right?
Sure.
Ultimately, leaning into that framework was really important. We used a framework that is based on an assessment tool called the Working Genius. And we call the framework the widget, which is right from the Working Genius model. In your words, tell us a little bit more about that framework and the model and what made it unique and special.
People, I think, well, number one, they loved the term widget. It's fun. It's easy to remember. What's also great about it is it refers to your working genius and then also a process and how you use your working genius in the widget process. So they're one and the same. They're not two different things. Your working genius is not different from the change process. So that, I think, was really magical in a way. But what I think I really liked about this one is, and what made it easy for people to come together around, was the fact that it was so simple. The other acronyms that were introduced, Sarah and SCARF, that's when I think people really started to resonate even more, because you're talking about the feelings associated with change and giving people some terminology to, again, anchor to when they're experiencing their own emotions associated with whatever change. So it helps. It's almost like a decompression of a balloon to be able to use some of this language when moving through the motions and emotions of any change.
Oh, I love how you said that. I think that's so true because the minute that we start to understand ourselves and each other in relationship to a decision or a change or a challenge of any sort, it could just make things so much easier. So instead of just being reactive, I can think, oh, I get it. I'm reacting to this because I'm a wonderer. We have to explain the widget terms in a minute, but I'm a wonderer and I just have a lot of questions and my questions aren't answered right now. I don't feel like I'm getting the answers, or I don't have an opportunity to ask my questions or something like that, because we're farther down in the change process, or, we're farther down in the decision model. And so now I'm the SCARF model. It stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And it's the sort of set of constructs that we all have that we filter things through. And I think to myself, oh, is my status threatened right now? Or is my sense of fairness threatened right now because I haven't been engaged in this conversation the way I want to, or something like that. So I did definitely notice during the program how people really keyed in to the acronyms, to the language, and it became very illuminating. It was like, oh, wow, now I can see myself in relationship to this whole work process, which is always kind of going on behind the scenes. It's not like we created something new. We just sort of brushed off what's already there, like the way decisions happen,
Yeah. And being able to have the kind of lights click on, like, oh, okay, this is why, not only why I'm responding the way I'm responding, but having empathy for how another person is responding in a very different way. And it's like, well, my wonder and your galvanizing, we're just clashing right now. My wonder and your galvanizer, we're just clashing. And oh, okay, that's why we clash. So instead of just, rubbing up against that clash and focusing on the clash, I understand now. I have a bit more understanding of why we're feeling this clash, what I can do to come to the conversation to have it be more productive, because I understand now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is so freeing.
Yeah, it becomes less about the person, the problem, the perceived problem with a person, and more about the process and where each person is in the process.
Right. Absolutely. I think we should just explain what widget means. You want to do that?
Yeah. So Claire introduced the Working Genius model developed by Patrick Lencioni. He's got a lot of great books out there. And that was also maybe one of the underlying components that made this successful, because there were leadership team members and other members as well who have read other Patrick Lencioni books and are familiar with that work. So it became easy for leadership to also gravitate and model the way here. So working genius, it's wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the way it just models, it just shows us the exact way that work gets done, right? All work starts with a good question. Somebody with a genius of wonder maybe asks a question, and says, how can we incorporate AI into this process? Or what should we do about this water issue? Or, how can we help our growers be more successful? Or whatever that question might be. And then the inventors respond to that. The genius of invention responds to that question with ideas. And then discernment kicks in, and we have to evaluate and assess those ideas. And once that happens, we can actually make a decision. I love to just talk about how being clear on when the decision will be made and how it will be made and, the steps of the process has been really illuminating. In fact, a lot of folks in class, one of the things that really resonated for people is this idea of, hey, are we above the decision line or below the decision line? Like, are we still in wonder and invention, what's also called ideation? Are we there? Because if we're there, now I know how to use my genius to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're below the decision line, I can use my genius to contribute, but it's going to look a little different,
Right.
So everyone can play a part in the decision-making process, which ignites change, but we can participate based on what is called for at that time, basically. I love that.
Yeah. And the decision-making conversation, I'm reflecting back to that without going down a big rabbit hole. I think that was super key in this training because that's also what can be just such a point of frustration is who holds the D too.
Who gets to make the decision?
Who gets to make the decision?
Yes.
And to empower those individuals who are not decision makers, but who also have a perspective or opinion on which direction we take because of the impact it could have on not just their work, but the business outcomes.
Yes.
So that was really important to ensure that people still have a voice, even if you're not the decision maker. And how do you proactively and productively do that through managing up and or across?
Yep.
And that is, we are all empowered to do that and actually responsible for doing that if we have a strong opinion or we're going to be engaged throughout the change process, that we can have influence and we can use our voices for that influence. And I think that was just really an important point to drive home.
Absolutely. Because even if, we just talked about this decision line being kind of at the D in widget, and let's say that my geniuses are enablement and tenacity, I can still contribute before the decision is made. I just need to know how, when, and where. And I could say, hey, as somebody with enablement and tenacity or galvanizing or whatever, as we're making this decision or before the decision is made, I'd like to contribute information about how this is really going to play out on the ground. Like, I'm a person with tenacity. I may have my hands in actually making this decision move forward, really tactically. I want you to understand what the tactical needs are of this decision before we cross that decision line,
Yes. Have you considered XYZ?
So maybe the decision is not mine to make, but I can still contribute and contribute constructively because I understand where we are in the change process.
Right.
In the decision process, really. It's like the decision process ignites the change process. It's kind of like how we oriented ourselves around this. And I just felt like it was so much fun to watch people pick up the language instantaneously and start, asking who holds the D and, are we above the D or below the D? And then understanding their geniuses and understanding how to apply those geniuses at the right time in service of what needs to happen, I loved that.
It was fun outside of the trainings too, to be in meetings and things like that. And people be like, okay, I'm in my wonder wheel right now. Sorry, guys. Let me just play around a minute for this. I know you all are maybe galvanizing, but like I'm back here in my wonder wheel. So it was really fun to see people lean into that with humility and with trust.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. So they can apply their passion, but with humility and trust at the same time.
Yeah.
I love it. So I think one of the things that made this program successful was the leadership support. And you already mentioned that, you know, the leadership commitment was really there, and probably in part because we started there and we gave them the working genius and, you know, had a chance to really evaluate the model, but also because they were familiar with Pat Lencioni's other work and that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about the leader commitment and how that played out and how that's necessary for success in a program like this?
I think I'll talk about it in two different ways. Like, one, maybe what the perception was, and then what the reality was, because perceptions was different than the reality. But number one, I think this is again going back to air quote strategic HR business partner is. And again, just how I view it in those concentric circles with the HR strategy being one and the same of the business strategy being embedded in it. What was super clear with introducing this program is that it wasn't just an HR idea. I didn't just go and think about this by myself and come back to the leadership team and say, hey, this is what I think we should do. So that does happen and that can work, but there was leadership engagement all throughout it. There were pain points that leadership team members were feeling. There was recognition that as we were trying to drive change, that we were running up against some, you know, big challenges in doing that. And so there was this palpable need that maybe we couldn't all define in the same way
Right.
leading up to the point. We feeling that need and expressing it in slightly different ways. The concept of a focused capability development and or training, which essentially led to a 10-month training experience, anchoring that in the concept of change agility really resonated with leadership team members. And we were having these conversations and thinking about what the 2024 kind of people plan was going to be. And that can vary in the components that make up any one people plan for any one calendar year.
Yes.
But this was so important. This was such an obvious thing we felt we needed because of the changes that were already happening and the changes that we know are just inevitable to come with any growing business. And again, just in thinking about the external world and the pressures that will be put on an agricultural business and on our growers, the changes in our consumers' demographics, all that stuff is going to mean change. So we said, this is what we're zooming in on. This is what we are prioritizing. And all leadership team members, there were no disputes or disagreements about it. It was just a matter of, okay, now the details, who, what, when, where, why, and how,
Yeah.
and making some of those decisions, who's our target audience? How are we going to do this? What's the investment look like?
Right. Yeah, that's great. It's so nice to have that kind of sort of comprehensive, yes, this looks good. We need this. This looks like the right approach. We're willing to support it. Let's do it.
Yeah. We're willing to support it and want to participate in it. We want to also learn the content. We need to be able to model the way. We need to understand this because if we're asking our team members to do it, we have to be able to drive it and understand it. So that was the reality, but the perception was a little bit different when we launched it. And we remember those hurdles we had to get through in the first, few classes in the lead up to it. Because the leadership team, we did make a very thoughtful decision. We had some discussions around, what that leadership team member's participation looks like. They wanted to know the content, but should they be in the class with the rest of the group or not? Because again, we have different layers, different geographies. Leadership team members, we didn't want them to be doing all the talking or for their participation to hamper or prevent anyone from speaking up. So we made a very cognizant decision to have leadership team members go through it separately, still on a monthly cadence and still doing all the same things that the larger cohort, are otherwise referred to as our management team, was doing. But that perception at first wasn't the reality. People felt, like, why isn't the leadership team doing this? How come they aren't in here with us, and a little bit of finger pointing and all that, which was all power for the course. Like, this is why we're doing this. And again, everyone has a voice and a responsibility in the change process. It's not just leadership team members, or leadership doing top down driven change.
Right. I loved that.
So that was something we very much had to address right at the beginning. And it came up very organically.
Yeah. I loved how the leadership team dove in, adopted the skills themselves, let the management team participate independently, but then started working kind of vertically in their own vertical teams, bringing their management team members together to go deeper and to apply the widget model to specific kinds of decisions and changes within their own vertical teams. And I thought it was really powerful. I was very impressed with just the way leadership team adopted it. So tell me now, post-class, how's it going? What are you seeing? We had this great celebration at the end, and people all got what's called the widget desk. What's it called? The desk tool that everybody can post their geniuses and their competencies and
A widget of a widget.
and those prizes. Oh my gosh, that was fantastic. There was all these sort of trophies and prizes and a great slideshow, and it was so much fun. That was really fun.
Yes.
But beyond the celebration, how are people still putting it to practice?
Yeah. So that was important. And the way that the 10-month experience worked out is it ended right around goal setting time for this year. And so, because again, one of our goals of this investment was having it not just be a one and done, but really to get integrated. There's a couple of things that have happened. Everyone that participated in the 10-month training was expected to identify one of their performance goals for this year, 2025. And we know that with every goal is going to have some change component to it. So I shouldn't say every goal, but everyone's going to have a goal that's going to have some level of change to it. We said pick a goal and make sure that goal has a change plan. Share it with your leaders and also be prepared to share it in a management team meeting. And so that has happened. Now we're in mid-year reviews and people are revisiting their change plans. So again, that's one way to continue to weave in the learnings and the language from the course is having that being embedded in their performance goals. The second thing is we have bi-weekly or bi-monthly management team meetings. So it's a cohort of managers within Global R&D. And each year, those management team meetings, the focus of them has evolved. This year, we're focused on the 2 engagement survey areas that we've declared need attention. So open and honest two-way communication and solving problems quickly. These are hard areas, not only for Global R&D, but for Driscoll's in totality. So we're spending those meetings having more in-depth discussions and exchanging learnings about them. Managers are coming and saying, here's what's working, here's the things I'm running into. And what we've done is said, okay, let's merge these concepts. Like we should be thinking about how what we've learned from widget and the widget process can be an enabler to open and honest two-way communication and can be an accelerator to solving problems quickly. So we've being intentional about bringing those two things together. Because it's so often, and that's probably maybe easier for me to say as an HR person. You put yourself in a manager's seat who's not in HR and who's faced with, all the operational and project-based work. Sometimes the connection points aren't so obvious. So I think we have to create those connection points for people so it doesn't feel like so many disparate things coming at them.
Absolutely. But I think about that just off the cuff. It's like open and honest two-way communication can be so well facilitated when people are willing to name their geniuses, their frustrations, their competencies, to kind of like be vulnerable for a minute and say, oh, this is my discernment that's showing up right here. It's not you. It's not the process. I want to own that it's my whatever, my genius or my frustration or something that's showing up. It's going to be a very easy way to depersonalize a conversation and to build that trustworthiness and humility in that fosters open and honest communication. It's just one way, but it certainly is. I think it's key. It's very helpful. And solving problems quickly can certainly be accelerated by leaning into the widget model and saying, like, let's align from the start on the problem we're solving, and let's generate ideas together. Let's bring in people who have ideas on this. Let's now discern together and do all the steps in the process. And that can be so helpful. I know I use it with teams all the time.
Yeah, same. With my own team members and that was the other thing. We wanted the HR team who is supporting Global R&D to also be participating in this so we could reinforce. So even with my own team, sometimes when there's like, hey, gosh, like this person's already there and I'm still back here, or it's often that I'm saying, I'm over here already. Like, where are you guys? And they're like, well, okay. Are we above or below the decision? We weren't sure, Stefka. Like, okay, let me back up. Let me back myself up here.
That's so great. Well, Stefka, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. I really, really appreciate it. And I know we'll probably have questions along the way, but your wisdom and insight has been really, really helpful. So thanks for sharing. Thanks for being here with me.
Thank you.
And go lead the way. Wow, we covered a lot. I hope you found our conversation helpful because I know that many of you are in roles where you need to design people programs that accelerate business results. And I was personally blown away by how deeply engaged the participants were in this program and how the working genius accelerated not just the uptake of new skills, but it offered this fresh approach to understanding change. It was really, really dynamic. And now, because this was a rather complex challenge, it was a 10-month program, I'm going to share a brief of how the program was designed. I'm going to share that with my newsletter subscribers. So if you're not subscribed, now is the time. Come on over to clairelaughlin.com and sign up for the newsletter, and then send me a quick note to support@clairelaughlin.com. That's support@clairelaughlin.com. And I will get that brief to you right away so you can really see a little more detail about how the program was designed. So thanks so much for listening. Now, go lead the way. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels @Clairelaughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.